There are now more than 4 times as many people living in Essex than in 1901. But who are we? The People of Essex, the third programme in our series about 100 years of daily life, features born and bred Essex folk and those whose families have moved to the county from London. They describe the difference between country people and ex-Londoners. We hear also about the migration of Scottish farmers in the 1930s, the real Essex accent, and views on the county being the butt of jokes.
I had never been to Essex before I came here. There were certain stories that you heard from other people that Essex was a difficult place to live. Certainly when I was younger, people always referred to Essex as the second-class county. And it's nothing like that. I think it's an image, and it's still being talked about in difficult terms, I would call it, when people make jokes about Essex people. But I think most of it is quite untrue.
Essex, of course, is a county which is denigrated and held up to ridicule and comics and Essex Girl and the rest of it. It lies to the east of London, which of course is always a negative situation. Its suburbs have now, of course, become a little bit down market. There was always that business of docks, which were rather looked down again upon. There was Dagenham with its council estates and the Ford factory, which grew up rather quickly. To some extent, if you say you come from Essex, there's rather a bit of a snigger from some people, but it doesn't worry me too much, because what we've found is that there's a great deal going for it, and that at the end of the day, people talk about, oh, they wouldn't swim at Southend, but we've always done this all our life. And as far as I'm concerned, well, if people don't come down to the place because they think it's slightly beneath them, well, no, let's have it left to us. I don't mind. Keep the crowds away. It's a very misunderstood area, and I think it has suffered to some extent. I'm a great Essex man, yes, I'll stand up for Essex.
Do you think there's a difference in how Essex people might have been regarded in the past compared to now? I mean, there's a lot of talk about Essex people, isn't there?
Yes, and I think a lot of that is unfair. They were basically agricultural for their living, and so the majority of them were pretty hard workers. I think there are a lot more who have for some time been in industries other than agriculture in the south. They had the Thames there, you see, all those years, which gave a living to many of them, which took them elsewhere. When Tilbury Docks was being built about 100 years ago or so, the dockers were drawn, some of them from the countryside. The dockers referred to them as the green men and the cabbage men because they spoke with this accent. But most of them were Cockney in origin who came into the docks from the London docks, and that was the start of it, and it grew from there throughout many industries which started up in the southern area.
Anyone who doesn't live in Tilbury, it seems they always look down on Tilbury, and there's this negative feeling about Tilbury generally, and don't like it or don't like the people. And when they meet you, they think, you don't seem like the type who comes from Tilbury. In college, for instance, one day in sociology, we went around saying where we came from, and Grays, Stamford, etc. And then I said Tilbury, and I heard people sniggering. This town has got a really bad name, and I think that's made me more conscious of it. Not with all people, with a lot of people, we're very badly looked down on and considered all criminals and scum and pikeys and that. But, I mean, the other day I heard where St Chad's has got the lowest results in Thurrock. I heard some people say, oh, we should just blow Tilbury up. Or I don't know what it is, because, I mean, you go from here to somewhere like Grays or like East Tilbury and that, and there's not really that much difference. It's something which is ingrained on people who don't live here. They just seem to have a fear of it. I can't really put my finger on it.
So how do you counteract that prejudice? I mean, do you sort of stand up for the fact that you're from here, and that's the sense you shouldn't be ashamed of that?
No, I'm proud actually of coming from Tilbury, and when I've gone to like adult parties, with my mum and that, often I've been up to 2 a.m. defending St Chad's and defending Tilbury, because I feel very strongly that you should respect other places. I don't like people judging Tilbury because they're judging me, and I feel as part of Tilbury is, the bricks on the houses.
There has been a great deal of influx, for instance, in this area in the 1930s of Scottish farmers. I do remember when many farmers went bankrupt, this was tied up with the tithes they had to pay in those days. And I do remember farming folk coming down with their stock, with their cattle and so on, coming down in a complete train load. Yes, a number of the farmers around here and further into the tendering area, toward the Suffolk border that is, are Scottish. One of the biggest farmers here on the Round Estate is still a family whose name is Macaulay, for instance. And I know another one very well indeed in Laermalney, Strathern.
My father and mother came down from Scotland in 1930, and they didn't have much. They brought the cows down with them that my father's father had given him 7 cows. I can still remember all their names. They were Ayrshires, and they had huge big horns. It was a hard way of life because there was no machines to help them in those days, and my mother had to milk the cows by hand, and even the morning I was born she had to milk the cows. Scotland was my parents' home, and therefore they were a big influence on me as a child. In front of our house at Birch there was a brook running past, and there was 2 bridges over, the front bridge and the back bridge. Well, we used to go over that bridge to go to school in the morning, and I used to say, I'm in England now. And at night when we came home, I was back in Scotland again on the farm.
I moved to Chelmsford in 1968, having lived in London for many years. I was employed by a company in the West End in the shoe business. My wife and I decided to move out of London because of the housing shortage, and we were actually tremendously surprised that the housing situation in Chelmsford was wonderful. There were so many houses, and the choice was terrific.
We moved to Witham when I was a teenager because at the age of 55 my father had a heart attack, and so he had to stop work, and so we were free to move from London because his work was in London, and so we moved to one of the Overspill Council estates in Witham. To me it seemed very nice because we'd lived in the East End of London before that. First of all, we lived above a shop, so to have a nice house was very good for us, and it seemed spacious because there was grass around it. The houses weren't so close together and there was room to move around more, so we liked it very much. When we went to Witham, I remember seeing the children going to school and seeing the London children and the local children together, and they were very different from each other at that time. The local children seemed rather afraid of the London children, and the London children seemed very strong in their ways, and that has really changed over the years. They've really become one. I've seen that happen. Their language was different. Of course, their accent was different, and the London children tended to speak much faster and be perhaps stronger in the language that they used, and faster in doing everything at first.
I think you've only got to go around the perimeters of the towns in Essex and find the estates which have been built since the war, and it has changed the outlook. Towns are more affluent now. Brentwood, Chelmsford, Witham, Southend, Colchester, they're actually much better for the new intake of residents. and I think the towns have prospered because of it. If they had remained small market towns, for the people here it would have been wonderful, but they may not have been able to continue the business side of it.
When Basildon was built after the war, I mean, Basildon is always the one that they throw the stones at, isn't it? They talk about the Basildon man or the Essex man, the Basildon girl and the Essex girls and so on. I think that many of them were from what we look upon as the East End of London, but they weren't all from that part.
This particular part of Essex is bastardised. I'm sorry, I can't think of a better way of putting it, but bastardised from the point of view there's been such a terrific influx of the likes of myself from London. If you actually look at Basildon for what it originally was planned for, is a brilliant place to live. The unfortunate thing is that a lot of people, I hope I'm not one of them, but they've actually brought their London ideas into Essex. Unfortunately in this area now, the local ways are getting overrun. You don't meet Essex people in this part of Essex. Go up round Colchester way and that, and not the town centre pubs or anything like that, but the little locals that are on the outskirts, and then you'll meet real Essex people.
We used to have some friends, they came from London, and they used to love to hear me talk, I think, but they didn't know what I was talking about, not about the country. If you're born and bred in the country, you're a country boy, and you never change. You can't make a town person a country boy, and you can't make a country boy a town person. That's separate. A lot of people say I come from Suffolk because of my dialect, but I've never been, never born. I'm an Essex man. I always will be an Essex man. Essex is a country place, really, isn't it? Although if you get into you're only going to Colchester, they've got a different accent to what we have. You go to Chelmsford, country people talk country, don't they? You know, town people, they've got nothing to talk about, have they? If they work in a factory, you know, years ago you used to go up the pub, didn't you? Farmers and farm workers were always talking about what they'd done and how they'd done it and what's going to happen next year and what's happened this year. But if you work in a factory, you go in there and you same job day after day, day after day. A farm, you go to work, you never know what's going to happen during the day.
I only identify with this part of Essex, which I believe is quite different from the part nearer London. This is almost into Suffolk here, and it's much more rural here and old-fashioned and traditional and good hard-working families. I only really know about this side of Essex, and I like it. I like it very much.
You're in hamlet of White Ash Green, which is between Houston and Gosfield. And I was born here, and I've lived just down the road, sold the business, moved to where we're talking now. We're sitting in the kitchen of the house just down the road. We're right on the Essex-Suffolk border, but if you say going Chelmsford way, if you go London way, no, that's not for me. I'll go the other way. Put it this way, my first wife said she was moving to London, and I said, fair enough, you carry on, mate. I'd sooner live in a tent in the middle of a field before I'd live where our son lives now. He lives in Dockland in London, which is fair. He likes it, he enjoys it. But now they've got a baby of their own, that's not quite the place it was. They're starting to look for somewhere where the child has got a bit of room to run around in. That might be all right while they're young, but they're starting to settle down and they're seeing different values in life, I feel. But as far as I'm concerned, no, I don't want to go London way. I trust the people who have got a country accent.
The genuine Essex people that I've met, they worked on the land. Some possibly left school at 14 years old, even to the point where Dad had a small holding or a small farm, if you like, and, well, you're not going to school today because we've got to get the apples in or something along those lines. A big day out to one guy that I met was to actually go to London for the day. He went there once and didn't want to go back. The material things didn't mean so much to them. Still quite happily living in the old cottage that Mum and Dad lived in and probably Nan and Grandad lived in. This particular guy still got a couple of donkeys in the field at the back of his house. Got something to eat, we've got a roof over our head. To them, that was the important thing. To us, we'd have a roof over our head. But why can't I have the automatic washing machine and the colour television, etc. in there? Because we're doing better for ourselves. We've brought the fast way of life into Essex, whereas right out on the extremities of Essex, they're trying to really seriously hang on to their little bit. What's really happening is their Essex isn't expanding down to us. We're expanding our bit of London up to them.
How would you describe Essex people?
I think they're very stubborn people with a good sense of humour and a very nice tradition, rightly so, I think, for friendliness. I think sometimes they are rightly thought to be a bit slow in the uptake, but there again, that's something which I wouldn't subscribe to very much.
I spent a good part of my early life and early school days living around in Forest Gate, which is very close to Upton Park where we're sitting now. But then I moved to Hornchurch and now I live in Upminster, and I'm very pro-Essex, you know, and it always annoys me when everybody jumped in on the Essex girl bandwagon, and I think that Essex people, and girls in particular, were very maligned. I always find the Essex people are very smart, they're quick-witted, and they're intelligent. You look in the city, a lot of the guys that work in the money markets invariably come from Essex, because a lot of the people that live in Essex graduated, as I did, from London's East End, and they've got very strong Cockney backgrounds, and they've retained that Cockney humour.
How about the followers of West Ham United? How significant is Essex in that?
Oh, very, because now most of our support comes from Essex, North Essex, Hertfordshire. I mean, if we could uproot Upton Park to an ideal new site, I would put it at Basildon, because I think that would be right in the middle where our core support is.
When I got married, I was living in Forest Gate, which is a few miles from the East End. And when we decided to move, the thought of going to South London didn't come into it. Being an Eastender, I had to stay in Essex, although I wasn't living in Essex. London is connected to Essex. I mean, you always find people moving from the East End mainly into Essex, Basildon, Harlow. I don't know anyone who's moved from the East End into South London, Kent. You just can't do it. If you're an Eastender, you are an Essex person if you want to move. You just don't go south, you come east. I guess because of that borderline at Ilford, you know, you just connect the two.
But Ilford, in those days, wasn't the East End. It was one step up from the East End, because it was Ilford, Essex. Part of Redbridge, I believe it is now. Barking was Essex. My grammar school that I went to, that was right on the border. And if you lived in Barking, you used to get a special bus pass because you was out of county. You was no longer part of the LCC. You lived in Essex, you know. And this was the differentiation, if you like.
At first, I would have preferred to be on the coast. When we came up Brightlingsea or somewhere near here, near to Colchester, we liked the area, but we couldn't manage that, so we came here to Wivenhoe, or Wivener, as I'm told I ought to call it if I'm a true Essex man. I knew it a little and felt that, you know, this was perhaps more obviously now true Essex than my part where I had lived and my family had lived for so long. I've got sort of memories of people. You see, like in Wivenhoe, as I said, Wivener, the O sound was never used. Dunmow was Dunmer, Baddow was Badder, Harlow, Harler, the whole lot, you see, so that that is virtually dead now.
People say to me, oh, you're a Londoner. Because I travel. I travel all over the country in pursuit of my hobby of horse racing. People hear my voice, you're a Londoner. I say, no, I'm not. I live 30 miles east of London. Oh, you're a Cockney. People on the Thames corridor, shall we say, have got London accents. Move out to Chelmsford, for example. They haven't got London accents, and it's only 10 mile away as the crow flies. They haven't got London accents. They have got an obscure accent which is bordering on the Essex accent. Once you start getting out towards the borders of Suffolk, the Halstead, the Braintree, the Colchester area, Harlow to a certain extent, you've lost the London accent and you're getting into the Essex accent, which is good. I mean, we in Essex should have an accent.
The accent and the lingo is also partly, the dialect, call it what you like, affected by Suffolk and Norfolk, if you go a little north, all of them further from London, and so the change in the terms and the inflection is still more evident there and here than it was down in the southern part.
Have you met born and bred Essex people who disassociate themselves from what is referred to as Estuary English now?
I'm married to one. My husband was born in Essex. My husband was born in Epping, and so was his father. They speak very nicely, and they object to being put under this Essex belt because they don't sound like that. But they're very conscious that it's the exodus from London that's brought it about. If you go a bit further out, I mean, even as far as Thornwood, what I call the countryside of Harlow, they speak with a real deep Essex accent. And it's lovely. It's really, really nice. And my husband's grandfather used to speak like that. If you were to class him as typical Essex, as it is now, he would turn in his grave, because he was a very, very loyal Essex man. He loved Essex very much. He used to have lots and lots of lovely stories about Essex.
The Essex dialect is strange to put into words, but for instance, any word that's got ing on the end, the I is left out if they can leave it out, and the G is left out, and it leaves you with the letter N, as they say it. Mucking is a place that I've got a very strong loyalty to, and they pronounced it then Mucken. See, in my youth, in my young days, and that was the same if they were talking about messing, they would call it messin, and Manningtree would be Manningtree. Very short I on the end, and the I before the N in Manning, and the G after the N go. They don't say them at all. It's rather interesting that they could say the G when they wanted to, because this place, Mucken, near to that is a little remains of what used to be called Muckingford, or Muckenford, if you were genuine Essex. And about 100 years ago from now, there was built there a few more modern cottages and things, and they wanted to give it a different title. Some people didn't think Mucken and Muckenford was very posh, I suppose, if you could use that phrase. And so they called it Linford, Linford. Well, now, when the genuine mucking people came to say that, and they're speaking in their normal voices, they still spoke of Mucken, but when they spoke of Linford, they put the G in, and they called it Lingford, and they call it that to this day.
But my children were born in Essex, and if anybody ever refers to my daughter as an Essex girl, I'm very, very upset myself, because I don't see her like that. She's blonde, but she's not a bimbo. So I think that's what's happened. There's this element of the blonde bimbo has got in.
Essex girls jokes, I think that's the main thing. But I mean, like, a lot of people, because I mean, I'm from Essex, a lot of like girls really do get in a big huff about it. But I mean, some of them are very offensive, and that we get take like our accents, Cockney accents, and taking the mickey out of and this lot. But I just take it as a big joke. This is like, I'm from Essex, I'm quite proud of it. I know there's like different people from different parts of Essex do speak differently, so I think it's variety. And people who just get in a huff about being Essex girls and this lot, I think they just got to learn to live a bit and learn to relax and take things as a joke, because I do. I laugh at most of them. I mean, apart from the ones that are really rude and really personal, I laugh at the rest of them.
I've heard many people say that Saffron Walden is on the borders of Cambridgeshire. I don't think people in Saffron Walden like to really think that they're in Essex, because there's definitely this stigma about being part of Essex. I mean, I only have to say that I come from Loughton, and people go, "Oh my God, you're a real Essex girl," you know. And so I think it's all since that came in, the media brought that in. I can't remember there being any shame about being attached to Essex when I was younger.
When you go abroad, that's a great one. When you mention you come from Essex, I actually say I come from just outside London now. I was in Portugal last week, and we met a lot of people from up north, from down south, even Portuguese people. And as soon as you say you're from Essex, they want to make a joke. Oh, okay. You know, you immediately get this look as if to say, "Oh, Essex, okay, I know all about Essex." You know, I've heard the jokes, and then they'll reel the jokes off to you. I think it's really sad, because I think Essex is a lovely county. And I know I've only lived in it sort of for the last 30 years, really, but when I first moved here, even here in Loughton, there was never that stigma about living in Essex. Not a lot of people have actually heard of Loughton. You say, "Oh, you live in Loughton in Essex," and they, "Where's that?" And the one thing I don't say to people is it's near Chigwell, for obvious reasons. Because that's where some of this stuff has come from the television. Because as soon as you say Chigwell, that goes into Birds of a Feather, that goes into Pauline Quirke and Linda Robson and Dorian.
If you go further down to the left, there's the area called Woodford Bridge. It's a bridge over a sort of little branch of the Roding River, which is usually a dried up thing. But Woodford Bridge is not in Chigwell, and people are rather ashamed that they have to assign themselves Woodford Bridge and not Chigwell. Chigwell has a certain cachet about it, in spite of Birds of a Feather, because there are some very beautiful houses here. There is a sense that Chigwell is a cut above. There are these very wealthy people, manufacturers, a boilermaker used to live next door. One or two ex-criminals moved here and rather gave it that name. It was a rather racy sort of place. People thought this is really quite humorous to have the odd ex-jailbird here, but I mean, you get one or two everywhere. They got that curious reputation. But generally speaking, they're mainly wealthy business people who live here. And a lot of doctors, I might add. We have a lot of Asian doctors, and so the whole population has changed from what it was when we came here. But they like the word Chigwell.
Every time a person goes into an Essex house, a real Essex people's home, they either get a little prize or they always get a gift of some kind. I know my grandmother, I mean, she was she was a Suffolk woman actually, but lived in Essex most of her life. And I used to be there quite often when the insurance man came or the coalman came. They all got a drop of wine and a biscuit or a cup of coffee if they wanted, or tea, something like that. And it seems to be like a tradition handed down. I mean, people come in my place, they always get something, and children always got sweets and that I give the children. A real Essex person is very keen on gardening and likes sport, very partisan sport people, you know, they like watching.
I have to accept that there are times when the only thing that I'm conscious of, so far as Essex is concerned, is in the address. And there are other times, of course, when you might watch cricket and Essex are playing, when you feel distinctly a part of Essex, if they're winning.
In part 3 of The Century Speaks, The People of Essex, you heard the voices of Ron Alcock, George Shaw, Leslie Thompson, Martin Kerrin, Doug Wood, Thomas Wiseman, Nancy Cannon, Christopher Barnett, Albert Lazelle, Janice Edwards, Barry Reynolds, Robert Locke, Alan Chilvers, Carol Matthews, Peter Stewart, Marie Wright, Pamela Jenner, Joseph Finer and Gemma Millis.